Good morning everyone, welcome to West Yorkshire Combined Authority here in Leeds, and this is the last Transport and Infrastructure meeting for this municipal year before we hit the elections. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank members here for their commitment to this committee. We are one of the only committees that's been quorate and thank you Councillor Khan for assisting us this morning in that. As we're all aware, public trust has been lost in recent years, and scrutiny is a really important tool to help rebuild that trust with the public. So I do appreciate your time, members, and your commitment and offering the suggestions that you, and the thoughts that you bring, the questions you bring to officers. It is really valued. I'd like to welcome any members of the public. We haven't got any in the gallery, but if there's anybody online. If you would like to look at the agenda pack, if you pop onto the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and look at today's date, the 15th of March, you should be able to find all the information on there. And thank you for joining us. Okay, for the benefit of anybody watching us online, I think it'd be useful also just to go around the table and say who we are and where we're from. So I'm Councillor Amanda Parsons-Hulse from Calderdale, and I chair this committee.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock from Kirklees Council.
Councillor Dot Foster from Calderdale.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Leeds Councillor.
Good morning, Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward, which is here in Leeds.
Councillor Harry McCarthy from Corn Valley Ward in Kirklees.
Alison Gillespie, Head of Place and Environment Policy at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi, Rebecca Greenwood, Head of Housing at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Morning all, Tom Hawley, Head of Affordable Housing Growth from Homes England.
Morning all, Tamsin Hart-Jones, Assistant Regional Director for Yorkshire for Homes England.
Morning, Andy Waller, Chief Executive WDH, but I'm here today as Chair of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership.
Daniel Clem from Together Housing. I'm also here on behalf of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership.
Hello, I'm Helen Ellerton, Head of Transport Policy at Combined Authority.
And I'm Simon Warburton, Executive Director for Transport here.
Mark Thompson, Councillor in Kirklees.
Tony Hames, Councillor from Wakefield, representing Pontefract area.
Sabia Khan, Councillor from Bradford.
Anna Watson, Councillor from Bradford, representing the Shipley Ward.
Joanne Dodds, Councillor from Bradford.
Katie Wright, Scrutiny Support Officer.
Caleb Broom, Scrutiny Officer as well.
Thank you, members, and welcome. Apologies, Khaled. What apologies have we got?
Apologies from Councillors David Merritt, Oliver Newton, Joe Atkinson, Julie Medford and Charlie Keefe. Tony Wallace should be joining us soon as a substitute for Julie Medford.
Thank you. And have we got any declarations of pecuniary interests, members? No? Great. Okay, item 3, possible exclusion of press and public. I don't think we've got any items that need excluding, have we? No. And item 4, minutes of the last meeting held on the 26th of January, members. Any comments thereon? Are we all in agreement it's a true and accurate record?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so item 5, Chair's comments and updates. You've all had emails on scrutiny protocol and level 4 devolution. The main headline yesterday, you might have heard the Combined Authority in this very room with the Mayor alongside officers announced that we were going to be franchising. So the bus reform... Yeah, it was quite a monumental moment for the Combined Authority. The bus reform consultation report was completed by an independent consultancy, and it was used to help make this decision. Now, members, this document has been sent to us all on Wednesday, okay? It is 1,147 pages long, okay? I do not have expected you to have read that, okay? I'm really grateful. However, there is a however, it does contain the strategic, economic and the commercial case for franchising. And in your transport scrutiny role, I really would urge you to look at this document. I know the decision's only just been made, but and we do have the option, of course, to call it in. I'm not suggesting for any minute that we should be, but I do think that we should be looking at it, though. I'm personally in favour of franchising our buses, as I'm sure many of you are here, but it is our job in this committee to make sure that we keep our eyes on the process. So if you could really, I do urge you to look at this document. A colleague of mine popped it through ChatGPT last night because I was complaining I wouldn't be able to read it in time, and some interesting stuff has come up. So yeah, it'd be really good to bring this back. Just give you the heads up. Okay, so
not to elaborate on that.
yeah, we're not going to elaborate. No, we can't really divulge into this discussion today. We have looked at bus franchising several times on this committee, and but we do obviously we need to start looking at the next steps. Okay. One of the other items that was discussed yesterday was the scrutiny protocol. And we had a working group on the 29th of January set up to review the 18 key principles. And I'd like to thank everybody who came to that meeting, because it did really make a big difference. I did ask for help, and help came. We had over about half of our committee here that attended that, so that was great. Thank you, members. I understand from the recommendations that we are going to move to a single committee structure next year. So this might be the last meeting that I chair, unless I fight for it. Keller, would you like to say anything about that, or are you...
Not much more than what was just said, in the sense of yesterday the combined authority decided to go back to a single committee structure, but the details are still being decided, and mainly depend on what the independent remuneration panel will decide in terms of remuneration for members, different types of member roles. But it will be a single committee, and anything more than that will be circulated to nominating authorities for the annual council season, so members will know sort of what positions will be up, and what it will look like, if you like, from June. It has to be confirmed again at the June annual meeting. So all we can say is really that. What I'll do is I'll circulate to members this afternoon the report that went to combined authority yesterday, that will outline in summary the main points of what the system will look like and what it aims to achieve. As the chair said about the level 4 devolution and the scrutiny protocol, the government has formally invited the authority to level 4 devolution, and one of the conditions is the scrutiny protocol has to be implemented by the 1st of March next year, 2025. And so there'll be another plan done to explain how we'll implement that. Again, it'll come around members at some point. That's it, really. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has, either now or after the meeting.
Yeah, I think we have talked about it quite a lot, haven't we? Okay. Flexibus. So as you're all aware, we met with officers after the last meeting on the 26th of January to discuss the decision that was made about ending Flexibus pilot in Leeds. We discussed what they did, how they did it, why they did it, and it was explained to us that the main reason for stopping the pilot was that it was doubled in price to over £1 million, which meant that it became unviable. A closure report on lessons learned is being written, and we've asked them to bring that back to us. The important question really of how the decision is, how was the decision made, and the improvements on record keeping and communications have also been taken into consideration. Can I ask the members who are there if anyone's got any comments? Is there anything you want to add to that? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I thought it was a really, really excellent piece of work because we were able to go into something in quite some detail, which we are often not. It isn't possible in other circumstances, and I was very grateful for that. One of the points that I want to make, though, is that one of the difficulties stem from the fact that the decision to close the pilot, yes, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, early, was delegated to officers, and I, there is a tendency, it seems to me, to do this rather than sending things back to committee, elected members who made the original decision. And I think the decision to close it early should have been something that the committee should have taken rather than delegating to officers, because I think that in a way it's too easy, but to me that kind of decision is what in planning in the planning context that I'm very familiar with would be classed as a difficult decision. So it really ought to go back to members to make that decision, and then it's then open for scrutiny more readily.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, just sort of echoing what Andrew and Amanda have said. It was a great meeting we had, and we were able to sort of get into the weeds of it. I suppose now thinking about the fact that we were able to have working groups, and we're going to change to a new type of scrutiny where there's only going to be one committee, I think we need to think about how can we still have those working groups that can get down into the detail as part of that, because I feel, as you said, that we did a great job of scrutiny in that working group. And I know we've done other working groups, haven't we? Last year we did one around kind of decarbonisation, and scrutiny needs to be able to do that, because like you say, you can't cover everything in a meeting. So I hope that as we go forward into the new level 4, that we really think about how we can do that detail, because it's going to be a massive agenda for one committee to cover, and I just think there's some good lessons there and really good ways of working that can be taken forward.
Thanks for that, Councillor Watson, and I echo that, and it is in the scrutiny protocol that we will be doing that, and we will be going out talking to people. We'll be going out into the community rather than actually just sitting in this room and people coming to us. It's really important that we get out and face to face with people. So yeah, I do urge members, if you've been on this committee this year, then to really think about joining next year as well. Okay, so affordable housing, item 6. The shortage of affordable housing has been mentioned many times in this room, in this committee, and so we've put it into the work programme as an important item. With over 7,000 people waiting in Calderdale, 20,000 in Leeds, 25,000 in Wakefield, 17,000 in Bradford, over 13,000 in Kirklees. According to figures in Housing Strategy 2040, when I added this up, that was 84,000, and these are just the people on the housing waiting list across West Yorkshire. That figure really does worry me, and it's not including the people, obviously, who are hidden, who are sofa surfing or living in mobile accommodation. Members, we have a housing crisis on our hands, and since COVID, with the rise of Airbnb and the rise of inflation, we've obviously witnessed many people struggling to find somewhere to live. And like other members here, I'm sure you all get emails from people who are really struggling with the situation. And it is so easy to look at these figures and just see numbers, isn't it? And I think it's been brought up by, Kayleigh, Councillor Brooks brought somebody up at the meeting we had with the Mayor, somebody living in a shed. I had somebody with autism contact me the other day in tears. We are in a really difficult situation. So as a scrutiny team, I just wanted to make sure that we had looked at this situation and that we didn't leave any stones unturned, and that we did what we could do. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to our scrutiny committee today the officers from Wicker and Homes England, who've come to answer our questions. Alison Gillespie, Head of Environmental and Place and Policy, and Rebecca Greenwood, Housing Policy Lead. Is that, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're there, of course. And our guests, who've introduced themselves. Andy Wallhead from West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, Daniel Klim from Together Housing, Tamsin Hart-Jones from Homes England, and Tom Hawley from Homes England. Thank you so much for your time today, and welcome. So, firstly, I'd like to congratulate Rebecca Greenwood, Head of Housing, and Liz Hunter, who've had meetings with, on producing this amazing strategy. And I'm aware that you've been working on this for well over a year. This is not a new piece of work. And that it was approved by the Combined Authority yesterday, so congratulations. I'd just like to begin by asking, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Well, thank you for that, which is very kind of you. We've put a bit of a summary in the paper about the journey that we've been on. We've worked very closely with the Place Regeneration and Housing Committee, which I think Councillor Brooks was actually at one of the meetings as well, where we discussed this a few months back. This document is really, we're very clear that it's about setting out our regional role and the regional picture of the housing challenges and opportunities in West Yorkshire. And we've absolutely recognised that there are 5 local authority housing strategies that are statutory documents which officers locally are working to deliver. And what we're looking to do here is really add value to that at regional level, particularly with some of the constraints and challenges that local authorities are facing. The paper that's put together today essentially tries to sort of speak to the point that the question that committee raised around what is the issue with delivering affordable housing in West Yorkshire and how the Combined Authority can help, defining the definition we use for affordable housing, a bit of a picture on where the indicators are at the moment, the work the Combined Authority is already doing with local authorities, Homes England and West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, and also how some of those partnerships are developing. So that's all I think I wish to add at the moment, Chair, and happy to pick up any comments with colleagues.
Thank you. Okay, who would like to kick off? Andrew.
Sorry, it's me again. I'd just like to ask a very simple question, and that is the use of the word affordable, because unless things are put in place, like I know my authority has done, to have affordable in perpetuity by putting a charge on the mortgage, things will be affordable only once, and then it's only, in my opinion, only barely affordable for a lot of people. And I, without sort of expanding the question to ridiculous limits, the whole housing market in this country is completely broken because the integration of housing for rent and for purchase is not properly regulated. And I'm not suggesting that the assembled people here can do something about it now, this morning, but I think we should try and work out how we move towards getting a properly regulated housing market, that where the two players here, the Combined Authority and collectively the 5 authorities, are not treading on each other's toes, but doing things to enhance the situation. Sorry, that ended up a bit longer than I was expecting it to be. But,
thank you. Yeah. Would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, of course, and wouldn't we all like to control that, Councillor, I think is what I would say. Obviously the housing market is market driven and market led in the way the housing market is set up in England. Affordable housing, the definition that we use here is around affordable tenures as defined in the National Planning Policy Framework, which is defined in the paper, affordable rent, social rent, shared ownership. But I do appreciate then that doesn't actually directly impact on house prices. There is indirect impact, so the more affordable housing that you deliver, so if you look back to post-war, for example, when more affordable homes were delivered, you can see the impact that then has on balancing out the market and balancing out market prices. So it's the way that the UK housing market is structured as to why prices go up. I think the work that we are trying to do with partners is to boost affordable housing delivery, and also through our strategy, I hope you'll see under Objective 4, that we've tried to specifically talk about those challenges of affordability in West Yorkshire, and we've not been backwards in coming forwards about saying our private rents and our prices are going up, and that is creating intense challenges for people, and that's against a base of low incomes. So whilst, as was rightly said, we can't answer those challenges in this room directly, we absolutely try and recognise that through our strategy and trying to work with our partners to deliver as much affordable housing as we can.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of come back on that point, Councillor Pinnock. First of all, in speaking on behalf of the members of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, most of our stock is affordable indefinitely. So we get grants on new delivery. We get grants from Homes England, and those conditions are applied. However, what's affordable? And that has changed because a lot of our rents are set at 80% of market value, and we know what's happened in the market. So markets have gone up, and now that does vary across the geography. So some associations are quite local, some like ourselves are regional, so we have properties all over Yorkshire and Humber, and it's very variable, I would say. So we've just done a scheme, or we're doing a scheme in Leeds, and when I looked at the rentals and applied the definition of affordable rent to those, I thought, who the heck's going to be able to afford this? And not many was the short answer, so we're actually doing them at a lesser rent. But making that stack up is a challenge. I think the real challenge there, it is supply and demand, and there just hasn't been enough supply. The demand is outstripping the supply at the moment. There's been property taken out of the market because private landlords, have made it's become more difficult to own property. I think some of the raising of the standards is the right thing to do, but it has driven perhaps some landlords out of the market, and all that's done is push up rent. So there is an imbalance at the moment. So even properties that are classed as affordable in some parts of the region probably aren't, and that's a challenge. And the only way I think to crack that is going to be to deliver more.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Just on, and I know it's. I'm just wondering if you have data on this really as a combined authority. So obviously what we see whenever a new development comes forward is there's always a challenge over how many, obviously in Bradford we have a policy, X percent needs to be affordable housing. The housing developer goes, oh, not viable, thank you very much, can't do it. If you want these houses, you're going to have to agree with me because otherwise we're not building them. And obviously it leaves this situation where even though we're all wanting to see affordable housing, even though it's not perfect because it's not affordable, the developers hold all the cards. And I wondered, one, if there's anything that the combined authority can do about that, and secondly, do you have data, from across the authorities of how many, basically affordable houses are not being built because the developers have used the viability test, which many of us, I'm an environmental campaigner, we campaigned against that, knowing that that's what developers would do. And I just wondered if we've got data on how many affordable homes we're missing out on, basically.
Unfortunately, we don't have that data, so that nowhere is that. So that data is all held by local authorities on a site-by-site basis as a planning application comes in, and that Section 106 negotiation happens. That's not then aggregated anywhere across our local authorities to then aggregate it to a West Yorkshire level. We are currently doing some work commissioned with a partner to look at how we can standardise viability assessments in planning across West Yorkshire, which will help us get that database. So whilst we don't have it now, it's one of the pieces of work that I'm doing alongside our policy lead for spatial planning around trying to get that data, so we've got a much better and more robust evidence base around that and around how we are addressing those viability assessments as a region. Each local planning authority, it's up to the local planning authority as to what happens in that negotiation, but where we see the value in that at a region is there's probably a lot of learning across the 5 that can happen, and then there's more that we can gather to put the case into government around where it's not working and where changes to planning policy can happen. So because we do recognise that a lot are lost through viability, and it's being able to robustly challenge that, and I think the collective endeavour of doing that across 5 local authorities adds value to it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your question. I'm just wondering if it is political, if that situation is so. The combined authority is still quite a new combined authority, and we're still finding our feet, I guess. We're still finding out where those relationships are beneficial, yeah? And I would definitely say in this situation, that viability, that sharing of data needs to happen for the good of all, yeah? So whatever we can do, I don't know whether we can make recommendations to make that happen, then that's really the trajectory we need to think about. Thank you. Do you want to add to that, Andy?
Yeah, just on that point, I think what the Combined Authority does publish each year, they publish a list of all housing completions. I think they might be actually included in this report somewhere, and they also include the number of affordable housing completions. So you can see a percentage from that. However, what it doesn't tell you is what was done on each development. So I think in Leeds, for example, last year, I think they delivered about a third of all the new houses were built in Leeds were affordable, which is pretty good. But of course, that will also include developments that were 100% affordable by organisations like ourselves. So to answer, there are developers getting away with not delivering affordable houses. Absolutely, and it's frustrating. I get frustrated when I see schemes going through, getting approved, and they say, "Oh, I can't afford it," and you think, actually, there's just more profit going into the back pockets of developers, and it's a difficult one for local authorities because they want to see houses, because there's demand for houses of all tenures, including market sale. We can't ignore that, but there is an issue here, and the planning system, and it won't just be in West Yorkshire either; it'll be across the country. It is an issue. I'm not sure I have the answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you. No, but it's good to actually voice it, isn't it? And the fact that we share in this the same experience. Councillor Khan is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The development of affordable housing, I wonder if it's part of the strategic plans in terms of development of cities as housings or city villages, as most of the city centres, there's a decline in retail, and are we strategically approaching this development, and how can we accelerate it because of the severe shortage of housing that the Chair has alluded to? I would like to see a clear plan, to make use of those urban spaces, but also have the resources invested so that they are made better, for families.
Thank you. Are you going to come back on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I can say. I mean, I would certainly look to colleagues at Leeds actually on that and their affordable housing growth plan, which actually has seen some of the increase in Leeds, for example, in affordable housing over recent years in city centre, because Leeds has done quite a lot of work to recognise the growth of build-to-rent sector and the more work that can be done in Leeds to deliver affordable housing in that. It is really challenging because of the issues that we just discussed. The other thing I would say is at a regional level, we've got a strategic place partnership with Homes England, which identifies 16 focused projects. A number of those are town and city centres, recognising the exact challenge that you've put there around sort of declining retail, declining size of kind of retail cores of our town centres. We're developing plans in those areas at the moment with Homes England and with districts, where we are certainly scrutinising the level of affordable housing. I think some of that is about the right level, so there is a housing wait list, but getting the right balance, because some of history again has taught us there then ends up in issues of stigmatisation, where you have huge communities of social housing, particularly if you look to London, and then higher value areas next door to it, so it has to be kind of developed in a very sensitive way. So that's one of the things that we're doing collectively. So I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
I was just going to say, it might be worth at this point, just if Tamsin and Tom could just give us a little bit of an overview of where you fit in this relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Homes England is the government's housing and regeneration agency. So as Andy just mentioned there, we have a range of different tools, a range of different funds that we can deploy to unlock housing growth and regeneration. One of those is the Affordable Homes Programme, and Tom is our expert in that, so I'll bring him in a minute. But we also have a range of other tools supporting SME developers with development finance. supporting developers with infrastructure loans, and also viability challenges on big sites as well, infrastructure grants for those strategic projects. So we've worked really closely with the combined authority, our local authority partners and the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership over the last couple of years. The Strategic Place Partnership that we have together is one of very few in the country. So it's a testament to the work of the combined authority around building up a pipeline and really working together in partnership with us. So as Rebecca said, we've identified a number of places. Bradford City Centre is one of those places where we're really working closely together, bringing the full set of tools that we've both got, but also the capacity, capability and expertise that Homes England brings to develop some of those projects, get those projects investment ready. So we have 3 strategic objectives in our Strategic Place Partnership with West Yorkshire. One is around investment ready projects, one is around sustainable communities, and lastly but certainly not least is supporting the Mayor's ambition for the delivery of affordable homes. So all of those things work together as well to ensure that we're maximising the opportunities for affordable housing delivery in those focus areas that we've identified. I'll hand over to Tom just on the Affordable Homes Programme.
Thanks, Tamsin, and thank you, Chair. So the Affordable Homes Programme is operating at the moment from 2021 to 2026. It's a £7 billion programme that operates in England outside of London. And what that does is provides grant funding support to housing associations, local authorities and other eligible entities to help them bridge the financial gap between the rental income that they may gain from a property or the equity that they may receive from a shared ownership property and the cost of either building that home or acquiring it from the private sector when modelled over a typical lifespan of borrowing of, say, 30 to 40 years. So we work with a large number of partners, and there are 2 different types of partners that we've got. We've got our strategic partners who work at a larger scale, such as represented by Daniel and Andy today. We've got 30 strategic partnerships, and what they've done is demonstrated to us that they have the skills, capacity and financial capacity to deliver at scale. So they were procured back in 2021 to deliver over 1,500 homes during that timescale up to 2026 and slightly beyond. And what we've got there is reliability with trusted partners that we've got some delivery coming through at scale and volume across the country. We've then got what we term as the more small to medium sized partners who come into us on a scheme by scheme basis and they ask for the grant funding that they need to unlock a particular site. So it may be that it's a part of a site that's looking to deliver affordable housing, or it may be a scheme, as Andy's mentioned, that's delivering 100% affordable housing. But the grant we provide is for, it doesn't go into Section 106 homes. So that's where the developer is intended to make that financial contribution to unlock those affordable homes. But we can enable affordable homes that sit outside Section 106 agreements. So the ways in which that we do that, as I said, long-term funding commitment and certainty for Together and Wakefield District Housing. And then partners come to us on a scheme-by-scheme basis. So members of my team work across West Yorkshire to engage with housing associations and local authorities to find out what schemes they've got on their radar, and we put that on what we call our pipeline of activity. When the bid's ready for a decision, comes into us with a request for a grant amount, confirmation on when it's going to start on site, other key bits of information, and we make a decision on whether to invest at that point then. So I'll pause at that point. Conscious I've provided quite a lot of detail there. You might have some questions at that point.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tamsin. I mean, obviously we've got market shifts, and I've got to ask for a place of scrutiny. You know, we've 40% reduction in government funding, high inflation, obviously cost of building materials, less construction workers to deliver such amazing projects. I mean, I've just got a massive how. How are we going to deliver this? You know, it's great to see we've delivered 1,500 affordable homes, 22-23. However, there's a big leap from that to 40,000 by 2040. Yeah, can you explain the how? Thanks.
I think it's going to be through partnership working and continuing to face those challenges together. It's not easy out there at the minute in developing for the reasons that you've outlined. There are three key pieces of the jigsaw puzzle when it comes to developing affordable housing. It's the planning and securing a planning decision. It's the land availability and where you're going to build a home. And it's the financing that enables that to happen. And you need all three legs of that stool to be working effectively and efficiently in order for that to happen. As I said, we've got some funding that's available to assist with that. Partners have got their skills and capabilities to bring sites forward. I don't know if Andrew or Daniel want to come in on how they go about that. And then obviously the local authority partners have got a key role in setting the planning context as well and in enabling schemes to come forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Andy. I just come and talk about the financing point, because I think that's an important thing to think about. So Together Housing is a long-term investor in property. So as a private developer, what you do is you develop a property and you get a capital return when you sell it. An organisation like mine or Andy's, we're interested in owning that property for 30 to 40 years. So it's a very different model and a very different way you think about how you develop a property, because you'll still be, if there's a problem, you'll be coming back in 10 years' time, 15 years' time to fix it. As an organisation, Together Housing's total debt is around £730 million. Now that's long-term debt secured with capital markets through banks and financial institutions and pensions funds, but changes to interest rates have a huge impact upon that. So around 70% of that is fixed, but if we need to go back out to the market to finance a development of 100 homes in Calderdale, we're then thinking about what our interest rate's going to be like in year 28 in order to pay that back. So, housing associations in particular, just think about it as large-scale mortgages, really. You're borrowing money now and you're returning it over a long period of time. So just never underestimate the importance of the financial position of organisations, but also the ability to secure capital in the long term and be able to repay that. Banks and pension funds only give us money because they know we'll pay it back.
Yeah, in terms of that pipeline that you talked about, I think it is going to be a challenge over the next few years. I think most of the larger associations that are active in West Yorkshire have a growing or a static pipeline. So I mean, ours is growing at the moment, but others I think remain kind of quite static. And we're actually finding it easier at the moment to bring forward affordable housing, bizarrely, than we did probably 18 months, 2 years ago, because private house builders aren't as active as they were 2 years ago. So you're probably seeing the pipelines. I mean, Tamsin and Tom may know, we're probably seeing the pipeline actually build at the moment, but that will only be short term, because the housing market will come back and then private house builders will start outbidding us again. So I don't want you to think that that's going to be something that's going to continue into the long term. It probably won't. So I think most of us who've got capacity in our business plans are buying land, we are bringing sites forward. And so I think in the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see those being developed because there's a lead-in time. So I think the next kind of 5-year term, if you like, I think we might see supply increase. Not quite sure what will happen after that, because there could be a levelling off or indeed a downturn. I think what's really positive over the last 12-18 months is that the government have kind of relieved the purse strings a little bit on Homes England, so we can do more on brownfield sites, because I suspect that most of the development that's taken place over the last 5 to 10 years has been on greenfield sites, which causes all kinds of issues politically for local members when you're ploughing up fields and building houses. Also, there are lots of brownfield sites across West Yorkshire that have been derelict and empty for donkey's years and desperately need to be brought back into use. And it's great. And I know Homes England have wanted to be able to do some of that for a long time, but have been held back by bureaucracy, really, centrally. And that appears to have eased a little bit. And I think if that continues, then that should help us certainly in the short term. And by short term, I mean next 5 years.
That's really useful. Thank you for that. Would you want to come in on that, Tam?
Yeah, I think both Tom and I might comment. So one of the, Andy flags the challenges around brownfield, and one of the great things we've been able to do together between Homes England and the combined authorities jointly fund projects. So quite a few examples actually came through the Place Housing and Regeneration Committee last time, where we'd got schemes which had affordable homes programme funding, but then also because there was a viability gap associated with the brownfield land, the Brownfield Housing Fund could step in as well to support. So that joint funding has been enabled, which is great. And I'll hand over to Tom because he may want to talk about some of the flexibilities that we've implemented as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Affordable Homes Programme is in no way geared towards greenfield development. It's always been able to do brownfield. I think that the flexibility that Andrew's rightly pointing towards there is we can now make contributions towards regeneration schemes. So in the past, if you were demolishing 10 houses to replace it with 20, we could only support the net additional 10. But with the flexibility we're being given now, we can actually support the 20 that are going to be the new ones that are delivered, which is actually in response to the points that the sector was making about how it was holding back worthy projects from coming forward, which is brilliant to see that flexibility. Hopefully that will remain in the next programme as well.
That's great. Yeah, they've definitely it's changed, hasn't it? It's enabled things to be released. It's, you know, people are often saying, look at these mills, we could fill these with people, and they're right, we can, and now we can. So brilliant. Rebecca, would you like to contribute?
It was just 2 points of clarity, if that's okay, Chair. The 40,000 that you referenced, it's just worth pointing out that 40,000 won't be entirely affordable, so that committee is aware. So that 40,000 is across all those 16 projects. There will be a mix, and the work we're doing is to look at what amount of that is affordable. So I just thought, particularly as we're at a committee meeting, of clarifying that. The second is brownfield is more difficult. Actually, in West Yorkshire, our track record across the last 3 years, I've just had a look at our recent report. We've about averaged out, so roughly about half on greenfield, half on brownfield. So we are doing a lot of work across that, and you'll know that obviously the Combined Authority has the Brownfield Housing Fund, of which 12 of the 27 approved schemes are being directly delivered by registered providers, so we've worked really hard there, and 35% of the overall programme is affordable, which is actually a really high percentage for a programme that's not directly geared just towards affordable housing. So just a couple of points I wanted to add to what colleagues had said.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, Councillor Dodds.
Thank you. Yes, the 85,000 is a heck of a lot of people on that waiting list, and it doesn't say how long those people have been on that list, which would probably be interesting. But I know I have a couple of cases in my area where they've been on the list for 5 years, and it's because it's two adults that do not share a bedroom, and they're in housing that is really, really unsuitable. But what they find is it's often the families that get priority on the 2 bedrooms, and I have tried all sorts to try and get them something, and it just feels impossible. And they've even tried to look at mortgage, but they'd need an 100% mortgage, and they just, you know, that's not something that they've been able to get. So there's a lot on that list that just aren't going to do that, and I don't know how you manage that. The other thing is in my area, there's a lot of rented housing that is well below standard, and some of the houses I've been in, you can't believe that people are living there, and a lot needs more to be done. And a couple of times I've come across cases where this housing has now been made up to a standard, but then the rents are more or less doubled or whatever because the standard's better, and then you find often no fault evictions. People are then forced out because they can't afford to live in that property that they might have been living in for a lot of years. There's lots of things going on adding to the challenges that you have, and I don't know what the answer is.
Thank you. Yeah, you speak for lots of us around the table. We all hear these stories.
Yeah, I mean, we all heard these stories. You know, both Andy and I work for housing providers, and we're the kind of solution. The problem we find is that the demand is growing, and there's so many people you can who've got those kind of stories that you want to house and we just can't. I'll just talk about the bit about regulation. I think Andy's going to talk about how we let homes and the relationship between us and local authorities. As a regulated social landlord, we're controlled to a certain extent by the government. We're independent organisations, but we're regulated. So if you're unhappy with a property from Together or from WDH or from In Communities or Leeds City Council, you can complain. The resident can complain, they can go to the Housing Ombudsman. We have to meet the terms and conditions of the regulator for social housing. So we've got a regulated social sector, but in the private rented market, different world. Now, there are some good private sector landlords out there, and I wouldn't want to say that all private sector landlords are bad, but there are some rogue landlords out there, and I don't know in terms of the case you're talking about. What would be great to see is a bit more regulation in the private rented sector to bring it up to the same level as we have to have in the social rented sector. Andy, I think, do you want to say something a bit more about choice-based lettings and how that works?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, so I mean, the way you described about people being on the list waiting is not uncommon. Most of the emails and letters that I see from MPs and local members is on behalf of constituents that are struggling very similar to what you've described. The way that homes are allocated is through what they call a choice-based letting scheme. So the local authorities effectively assess any applicant for first of all their eligibility for social housing, because if you're earning a lot of money you might not be eligible, and then if you're eligible you're effectively banded. So you're given an A, B, C, whatever band. Yeah. The reality at the moment, if I'm honest, is that unless you're on an A band, and for an A band that's probably somebody who's homeless, who might be in temporary accommodation, bed and breakfast, something like that, or with a child. If you're an A band, it will vary from place to place, but you'll probably be waiting weeks or months depending on how specifically you specify the kind of property that you want. So we do get people on the list and they'll say, I've been waiting a year, and when we look, they've said that they want a 3-bedroom semi on that street. Well, there aren't any available, so you will be waiting. So the broader their ask, the more likely they are to get on. But the reality is they'll still, even if they're very broad, and if all they said was we'd like a house in Leeds or we'd like a house in Wakefield, they're likely to be waiting weeks or months. If you're on a B or a C, you will be at the moment you're waiting years, and it's back to that point of demand. The supply of homes, the number of homes, isn't sufficient for the amount of people who are wanting a home, and we've seen turnover drop. So we get very few people leaving our homes. So once they get a home in social housing, I guess it's the same elsewhere. Yeah, exactly. But I monitor them weekly. I look at the turnover of our properties, and they've dropped. So it's less than 1% at the moment. So we have 33,000 properties. Less than 1% of our homes are vacated each year. So and then on top of that, obviously we build new ones, and we're building about 500 a year. So you can see that, with 20,000 people on the waiting list in Wakefield, there's about 6,000 who are active. So they're people who are bidding on a weekly basis. There's very little chance, unless you're an A, of getting to the top of that list. And and it's a sad situation, but that is the situation. I think in terms of quality, you're right. I agree with Daniel's comments. The sector hasn't always got it right. I think most of the horror stories that you've seen in recent years about quality haven't been in housing associations. They've been elsewhere. They've been in the private sector. They've been in local authorities that have been decimated. Their funding's been decimated. But I think most have got their act together. But the private sector isn't regulated. It needs to be regulated. And hopefully, there is going to be a new decent home standard introduced, or that they're certainly proposing that there will be. I think we would all welcome that. Yeah. But that needs to be applied across the board, exactly. And not just in some sectors and not others. It needs to be applied across the board.
I think we'd all agree with that. Yes. Thank you for that. And Rebecca, would you like to add?
Yeah, just a couple of points on that banding system. It's worth committee being aware that's set in legislation. So how a local authority has to band applicants, there is a priority need assessment that is set out in either the Housing Act 96 or 2002, I can't remember which one. So there is a reason why that system is in place. There's usually particularly where stock is transferred to a housing association from a local authority some point in the past, there's usually a nominations agreement, which some of those are expired now, but we'll usually say what amount a housing association has to go through the banding system, and perhaps has a slight percentage they can be more flexible on. So that will differ by local authority. So it's just worth being aware of that. And the second point on quality, we've absolutely recognised that in our housing strategy, and there's some real poor quality across West Yorkshire. The Renters Reform Bill has been coming forward for some time now to bring some changes, including around no-fault evictions. It's relatively stalled, I think is fair to say, and I think there's very differing opinions as to whether that goes far enough or not by different people. But just in terms of quality, we are obviously running the Better Homes Hub programme at the Combined Authority, and one thing we want to do more of around that is ensure that, as well as retrofitting and decarbonising homes, that we don't lose sight of improving some real basic quality things as well, absolutely recognising what's been said.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I've got a number of sort of interlinking questions, really. The first is about difficult to develop sites, which links in with Anna's question. I know of a number. One in particular has been, there were some flats on it. They were sort of needing an awful lot of work doing on them, so they were pulled down instead. Fair enough. I don't think anybody really liked living in them anyway. But that site since has been left vacant because it's not a particularly big site. It's difficult to develop because it's not flat, but nowhere in Coaldale much is. And it's just sitting there, and it's very frustrating. It's Together Housing owned, by the way, just to drop that on you. But it's one of those where you just think but there's got to be a solution. And various plans have been drawn up, and then they've been ditched because the money, the figures don't add up. So how do we get around problems like that is my first question.
Do you realise we're all going to be like lining up at the end of this meeting with our if you can set up a little casework at the end.
I'm going to be
you're welcome members to sorry
my second question is about the building of new homes with good insulation, so that we don't then have to retrofit them, which is an awful lot more expensive. At the moment, we've got huge questions around, cavity wall insulation scandals and all sorts of things. At work, one of my colleagues is involved in the SSB law debacle, which I'm sure you'll have come across. And we do have a problem with a lot of poorly insulated stock, and really it's so much cheaper to build stuff with the decent insulation in place in the first place, but we are still seeing houses being built that are poorly insulated, some not necessarily housing associations, but sort of private home builders. We've got one case file where the residents have been trying to get snagging issues sorted for years, and we're not talking small stuff, we're talking about windows with great gaps around them and all sorts of stuff like that. So the quality of build isn't there in a lot of cases, but the insulation, we're not building stuff that is future proof in a lot of cases, so that needs looking at too. And my last fairly quick point is about accessible homes. In particular, making sure that bungalows are built without steps up to them. The whole point of people needing a bungalow is because their mobility is limited, but the amount of bungalows people look at and think, well, I would love that, that would be perfect for me, but I can't get into the property because there's steps in the way. So is there funding available to look at that and address those points, so those properties are then available for people who need to move because of accessibility needs? Sorry, that's quite a lot, but
thank you, Councillor Foster. Do you want us to take a number of questions and then come back to
happy. I mean, I could deal with Councillor Foster's questions first, perhaps, and then we'll come on to some other ones. I know about the site in Tower Bridge that you're talking about on Tulle Lane. obviously in a public forum, there's certain things I can't say in terms of things, but we have had a number of discussions, as you know. I know you've been part of some of those discussions about what we can do with that site. It's complicated due to the aspects of it, and the lack of flat land. Again, we would want to develop it. If we could put affordable houses on it, we would. It's about making the scheme stack up, and how you can do that in the best way moving forward. So happy to talk to you about it outside the meeting, Councillor Foster, if you want. It might be easier to deal with it that way. In terms of the other two issues, I don't know if Andy wants to deal with the issues around building of new homes and retrofit. Just in terms of bungalows, one of the challenges that we have as housing providers is thinking about things for the long term. And how you can build a home that is meeting the needs of today and tomorrow. And particularly when we're building new homes, we do give a lot of thought to those things. Perhaps the homes that were built in 1972 or in 1982, were not thought about in the same way. So there's a huge problem of retrofit, and we own over 10,000 properties in Calder, as you know. It's quite difficult to go back and retrofit all those problems. We do aids and adaptation, so if a resident has a particular issue, they can apply. We work closely with the council around some of those issues. But I think that the planners of 1972 perhaps didn't always do us some favours about what we've been left with.
Yeah, in terms of quality, I recognise what you said. We get, if we sign up for 106 properties, sometimes my development team will say, they've gone to, the developer said it's completed, we've gone to look at it, and there's loads of snagging issues. And once the developer's gone off site, getting them back is a nightmare. So fortunately now we're in a position, because we've built our pipeline, we've got a lot in our pipeline, we just refuse to take them. So we but I don't know that we've always done that, and then we've either had to go and fix it ourselves, which is not ideal when you've effectively paid for it to be right in the first place, or we've tried to get the developer back, and but trying to get the developer back once they've moved off site is almost impossible. So I think it is about making sure that the building regs team at the local authority are all over it. Because most, in theory, should be built to EPC A or B now as a minimum, really, and certainly that's what we specify. And working with colleagues, sometimes we'll go beyond that actually. But of course, it requires the builder to actually do it to that standard. And like I say, I think you need to tackle it while they're on site, otherwise you've got no chance. In terms of the accessibility, one thing I can say is that at the last meeting of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, we agreed to adopt a new specification where it was possible for what we call dementia-friendly housing. Now that's got all kinds of criteria attached to it, but one of them is level access. So it goes beyond just dementia-friendly, it actually makes them more accessible. And certainly, and so we've adopted that. We've said that we're going to do that where we can. It probably is more challenging in Calderdale because you've got houses built on slopes. But I've said to my development team, I want at least, because I think the specification says that all external accesses should be level, and I've said to my team, even on some of those challenging sites, at least one of the accesses should be accessible. That I don't want us to build properties that are not haven't got at least one access that's accessible. So I think you will start to see more properties, not just bungalows, all kinds of properties that have got a better access arrangements, because that's, there are 15 associations in the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership. We've all said we'll adopt it, and it's now being monitored. So Rebecca, we now supply information to Rebecca and her team about how many we're completing that are accessible, so that you'll start to see that come through more and more.
Just to reassure you, we will be looking at that as too. So, Councillor Hames.
I'm
sorry. Did you want to?
Sorry, no.
Sorry, Councillor. I was going to say, just on the point on sustainability, difficult sites and accessibility, the Affordable Homes Programme can and does provide the grant funding when partners want to bring schemes of that typology forward. So it's a really flexible fund in that regard to meet local policy requirements when it comes to that stuff. Just an anecdotal point, I think sometimes partners do say that local authorities aren't necessarily asking for these things, and they will build to the requirements that are set out. And he's obviously set out a high ambition there for his organisation. I think local authorities do are in quite a strong position to articulate what they need for their areas and for people on their waiting list. And I think if you can articulate that clearly to the sector will invariably rise to that challenge as a good, responsible social landlord. And I think on the sustainability agenda as well, I'm having a lot of conversation with housing associations who take that agenda very seriously and are looking at how they can balance the cost of that against other competing costs when it comes to maintenance costs as well as development costs. Obviously, their capital budgets have to be apportioned between those competing pressures, but the sector is taking the zero carbon agenda very seriously indeed.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hames.
Councillor Hames, yeah. Ex-registered, national registered builder and concrete supplier. Now then,
Is that a pecuniary interest?
now when we're talking about the thing you raised first was the price. The market houses are governed by market price. At a time when two major developers are currently under investigation for price rigging. Now, take on the other hand, transparency in building. A new building, a new house, is subject to no VAT, no VAT whatsoever. So, what you're talking about is probably £40,000 worth of materials, what you get 20% back on, right? Now, is this price rigging related to the way that the national builders are dealing with their VAT refunds? Is the price rigging rigged around that? That's something that needs looking into. The other thing is, I've sat through the submission of the Wakefield Development Plan. I've sat through the hearings in there, and I look round this table now, and that were all developers. There were very few people speaking against what the developers were asking, and they were like Oliver Twist, asking for more and more land to come out of Greenbelt. The land to come out of Greenbelt because the starting price of a house is 350,000 quid, and that's what they're after. They want high value houses. Now, the way we're going to get out of this problem and building affordable houses, I mean, we could go down American route and open trailer parks, or we could, look at other aspects, do what we did after war and build prefabricated buildings and bang them up quick. That's affordable housing. Now, the other thing is, the way we can do it is form a relationship with really quality builders and have a select list of builders that work for each local authority and come to cooperation and have some transparency of whether that refund of VAT has gone taken off the price of the house, or are they just pocketing it and items like that. And that's what I think is the way forward. The way forward is for local authorities to grab control of what happens in their area and who builds in their areas, and then they can specify, well, we want this brownfield land developed first, and that's apply. And if a builder thought they weren't going to get any work unless they worked in cooperation with local authorities, then they'd all be lining up.
Thanks for that insight. Thank you, Tony. I've got a question on construction workers. On page 19 of the Housing Strategy 2040, there's an acknowledgement that we've got a national shortfall in construction workers, and we've got 70,000 in West Yorkshire that are declining in numbers year on year, and we need 225,000 in the UK by 2027. So can you tell us what we're doing as a combined authority to ensure that we've got enough construction workers to build these properties? How are we encouraging people to want to learn this trade? Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Hames, I wish you were on the Scrutiny Committee to government saying some of that, because some of that I'd love for that to be in our control. But just on your point, Chair, I think we can go back and get you some more information from our skills team on that. But directly, we do obviously have a business and skills team at the combined authority as well, who we're looking across a number of different sectors, including construction with a number of our programmes and a number of our providers in the region. So I'd rather take that away and come back with a bit more about specifically what we're doing. In our strategy, we've recognised that and are putting that in there as the hook to say we know this is also an issue in the whole chain of how we get these things built. So if that's okay with you, we'll come back with a little bit more on that for you.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm aware, people have left the country because of Brexit. We've had the whole issue shebang about people leaving. And yeah, we're really stuck. We've got lots of people retired during COVID. We lost a massive lot of people there. So we really do have to rethink about what we're doing and how we're going to do it. And yeah, maybe there's a role for you there, Tony.
I just want to say that, I mean, I've just completed 3 houses, and you get an awful lot. You might not believe this, but you get an awful lot for £100,000. An awful lot. And when you see prices of 350,000, you know that there's an awful lot of profit there.
Thanks for that. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
I didn't put my hand up, but I've been thinking about something to say anyway, which is Bradford, which is my hometown. I was brought up on between Ravenscliffe and Thorpe Edge Estate in Bradford, which was in the late 1950s, early 60s, and they grew quite quickly because of the need through the growing population post-war. What I'm interested in is finding out why the councils some councils would borrow money to have new green space in town and city centres, but they wouldn't borrow money on guaranteed income coming back in on what I class as social housing, which is council housing. So we've got the land, we've got the need, but we see very little action on us taking responsibility to fulfil that need. We palm it up onto, it appears, no, let me say that, reinforce that, it appears that we throw the onus on building developers and central government, and it looks like we don't take the responsibility ourselves, that we've got this hole, that we need this housing, where we could fill it with council housing on PFI money or wherever the money would come from, backed by the guaranteed income from the rents. But it looks like we don't do that. I know we don't do that in Kirklees. I think in my ward we've got the only council houses that have been built in the last 15 years, which is 5 of them. And I'm just curious to know why we don't take the lead, take action, and deliver the housing shortage ourselves instead of waiting for some body with a magic wand to come along and do it for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that directly because that does sit within local authorities in terms of placemaking and decision making around how to use space and how to use funding to what you do with that space. There is obviously benefits of green space and benefits of open space, which are all set out through a rigorous kind of local plan process as to where these things happen. And each local authority across the country will have their own sort of policies, their own borrowing against their various priorities. We don't see and haven't got a role at combined authority directly in dictating that and dictating where and how that should happen. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer some of those questions, and it would definitely be, I guess, in each local authority if that's something councillors are interested in to speak to local officers about.
Thank you, Rebecca. Tom, would you like to contribute?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a mixed picture. I don't have exact figure of each local authority represented here today, but there are some local authorities that do want to take that problem in and try and tackle it themselves. As Rebecca alludes to, it's the pressures on the housing revenue account as well, which can inhibit that ability to respond to the situation. That pot of money has got competing calls on it for, as you'll be aware, stock maintenance, decarbonisation as well as development aspirations. And that's why I think the benefit comes from working in partnership with other parts of the sector who can bring in their borrowing capacity as well to try and work collaboratively to address the situation. But there are many local authorities that are now seeking to develop more council housing. I think it's fair to say that there are skill shortages in that regard as well within local authorities to be able to tackle some of those projects, which again they look to get support from housing association partners or other avenues. But yeah, there's definitely some doing it.
Andy, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, Tom's answered most of that, but I think some of it's historic actually, because I think back in the kind of late 90s, early noughties, a lot of restrictions were put on local government borrowing, which prevented them from effectively raising funds to build council housing, which is why you got the creation of a lot of housing associations and stock transfers at that time. As a result of them transferring their stock out of the local authority, they then disbanded, did away with their housing revenue account, which is the thing that Tom just talked about, and that's the account through which they can borrow more money and they can take the rents from that and put it back in to pay those debts. Only 2 authorities in West Yorkshire have housing revenue accounts, Leeds and Kirklees. The others don't have them anymore because they transferred their stock. But I think there are still restrictions on local government borrowing, but I'm not, again, like Rebecca, I'm not the right person to ask on that. But I think there are still restrictions, so it does make it quite difficult for them to borrow money, even if there's a political will, which it sounds like there might be, to do so, that it's not that straightforward.
Thank you. And thanks for your question. We've got this measuring our performance. I've highlighted it because I think this is going to be a really useful part of the document for here, that we can bring you back, say, on an annual basis and say how are we getting on. I've got a question about Airbnb. I don't know whether you'll be able to answer it, but obviously COVID and all of its rules created the Airbnb sort of trend. And is there anything you can do to incentivise these properties coming back into the private rental market in your role? Any of you, obviously maybe not the social housing people, but I think as we see in sort of objective 1, I'd really like to see, number of properties that we've managed to bring back into use. Is that something that you have capacity or power to do? Thank you.
I'd have to look into that. I mean, last week at budget, one of the things the government announced was getting rid of relief rates around people who have second homes and making it less of an incentive to use it for an Airbnb to help try and bring things back. So the government's doing some thinking around that at the moment and released some bits in the budget. We can certainly look into if there's anything that we can gather in terms of our measurements of how many kind of second homes there are in the region and how many there are in West Yorkshire and the impact that has on supply. We don't have that at the moment, but we can take that away and look into it.
Okay, I know I can only speak for Calderdale really, but we do have an awful lot of people who have paid the rent and everything else, and then they're ended up homeless because their landlord has decided it wants an Airbnb. I've got Kelly Brooks. Oh, you want to come in on that one? Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, please.
I've noticed that there's an issue with rates where the empty houses are being identified and the council's illustrating that is blocking the provision of homes. Now, when you come to Airbnb, that's an empty house that's furnished, right? So an empty house that's furnished, they're going to start charging rates on. But an Airbnb, if you register that as a business, then you get it fits into low business category and you pay no rates. So I don't see how, unless they come out with some legislation about Airbnb, because Airbnb, there could be an owner with multiple Airbnbs, and he could have a big business, which in each different authority where he's gone, it's getting classed as a small business and paying no rates. So it's a loophole that needs to be closed up.
Thanks for that. You made a really important point. Andy?
It's just on the same point, yeah. I think it is interesting. I think there's certain parts of probably West Yorkshire, I'd imagine, Hebden Bridge and places like that will be classic, and also like North Yorkshire when you get into there, where you've effectively got ghost towns and ghost villages because nobody lives there anymore. I think possibly through devolution, some of the discussions that maybe West Yorkshire might get into over the next 12 months around devolution, maybe something to explore for the future about whether we can have buyback programmes so that we can acquire those properties back off some of these owners and then put them into a affordable housing stock so they're permanently affordable, and they're not then let out for the highest bidder, because it's not viable for us to buy them back because sometimes these properties are generating massive income. So the owner, as you can understand, thinks, well, I'm not going to sell it to you for 100 grand. I want a lot more than it would normally be worth. But I think if we could have programmes where they could be effectively purchased and put in selected places, not everywhere, but where you've got real issues like Ebden Bridge and other places, there'll be others as well. I think, you know, Harworth will be another one. I'm guessing, you know, I think be really, really important.
Thanks. let's not go down that route. All right.
Don't go
So,
there.
I mean, I was reading an article recently about the hotels. So a lot of hotels have been affected by the Airbnb situation, and then the irony in it is that we now have homeless people we put in hotels. Who knew? You know. So if we just look at the way it's all kind of turned upside down, and okay, you know, COVID was the catalyst for that, which is fine. People have made use of what they've got. But I think as we are out of that now and we're looking at the situation we're in with all these people desperate for homes, I think it's definitely worth considering what to do next. I'm aware of time, it's 11:20 and we've got another item, an important item on the agenda. I've got Kaylee Brooks and is that, okay.
Thanks, Chair. So, Objective 4 in the West Yorkshire Housing Strategy 2040. I really welcome the access to green space and play, and the safety of cycling and walking, and the mention of resilience of infrastructure. But I was puzzled that there was no mention of health infrastructure in that. I understand that WICA doesn't have direct responsibility for any of that, but it's something that's really, really important to people, especially when you're talking about increasing the number of people living in an area, and it's definitely something that needs taken into account when looking at where to increase the number of people living in an area. So, is there anything that can be done with the partnerships to influence the NHS? Because we, as a council, are trying to get an understanding of what's going on with the NHS, but it's difficult to get around that. And then also the reason for the reason for councils not building as much council housing as what is needed is because there isn't any guaranteed income because of right to buy. So you can build the houses, but then within sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how long that person's had tenancy for, they're sold off. So then you've got a gaping pit in your finances. So yeah, sorry, just about the health infrastructure side of things. Please.
Thanks for that. And also, if I add to that, mental health, because obviously housing affects people's mental health massively. So thank you.
Yeah, and that absolutely did come back, Councillor Brooks, in our consultation that we undertook on the strategy around community-based infrastructure. I think there is more work we can do. We felt the point of publishing the strategy, so much of that, as you rightly said, is reliant on the NHS, and education's another area that often comes up as well, is reliant on the Department for Education and other budgets, that we want to, through our plans, do a lot more work around how we can work more strategically with some of these bodies where kind of revenue funding is also a really big part of it. So there's the capital required to develop the infrastructure, but then there's also the revenue to run it. We do have strategic relationships with some parts of the NHS. The chair of the Integrated Care Board has recently, just at last meeting, joined the Place Committee, which will hopefully really help that relationship at a regional level. So I think we're kind of through this strategy. It's the first time we've started to really talk about those things in relation to housing. I think it's great to have a strategy, but actually I see this is the first step on our journey into some of these areas that you've rightly mentioned. It's not just about homes, it's about what they mean for people's lives and what they mean for improving population health, etc. Hopefully as well in this strategy as well, we've really written in there the relationship between housing and health. So it's people need houses, but they need good quality houses and affordable ones, so that for their physical and mental health, housing shifts from being a detriment of health to something that supports good health.
That's great, thank you. I'm really concerned about time. It's 25 past and we've still got another main item on the agenda. Is it a quick one?
Yes.
Promise.
Promise it'll be a quick one. Empty homes, privately owned empty homes. Is there anything that you can do to help shift those back into use? Because a lot of them are just stuck. There's all sorts of issues. It can be, you know, sort of pro bono, all that sort of stuff. But yeah.
And my understanding is that we're using council tax to do that, because I've just been on the receiving end of this. So basically, you get double council tax.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's not.
Is
just
there anything else?
It's just not just the council tax. It's the sort of how do we get those back into circulation when the owners of them just don't want to know, don't listen.
Yes, we can. I think different authorities have different approaches to that. So in Wakefield, we work with the council. Some of the Section 106 receipts that they get, sometimes when developers pay money into a pot rather than deliver the 106 on site, Wakefield have used that so that we've been able to buy properties, private properties, and bring them back. We tend to try to do that, particularly on our own estates, and always where there's a flat in a block, because for fire safety we like to own all the flats in a particular block. We don't want something going off behind the front door that we don't know about. So yeah, you can do it. It's really that the local housing department for local authority kind of have the powers to deal with empty properties, but the proactive ones can do something, and use 106 receipts is a good way to do it.
That's really useful for all of us. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, all of you, for coming today. You don't have to stay for the next item, okay? But we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, members. Item 7, local transport plan 4. I'd like to thank Simon and Helen, and great to see you back, Helen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us this update today. I have to say, it was quite thin on the ground. We were expecting quite a lengthy document, and I'm sure you're going to explain to us why it wasn't like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper that's come here around the LTP, I think my understanding is you'd asked for a longer discussion around different modes and different areas involved that will come across involved in the local transport plan. Where we are in the development of that plan, I can't bring that today. This is more about kind of where we are in that process. So I'll set out what the paper's doing, if that's okay, and then maybe where we can then take that going forward. That's all right.
Yeah, okay. It's obviously, I met you 3 years ago. We were talking about the local transport plan then, and I'm kind of like, it feels almost as if we've gone backwards a little bit, but I'm sure you've got a reason why, I'm sure legally there's a reason why as well, because obviously things have changed. So yeah, if you'd like to just embellish us, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we've been talking a little while about doing a new local transport plan, but there's been 2 reasons where we've been. The first one is timing. So it's making sure we have the hooks and the things, and making sure that are in place to enable that policy framework to really land. So that's the first one, and I'll come back to that in a bit more in a moment. And then secondly, it's around government guidance. So we still haven't received guidance from DFT, but we've been waiting for a little while, and it's been expected to come. It's unlikely to come in this government. So, but we've been pressing ahead regardless. But obviously talking about it for a while, because it's been talked about from government for a little while. If I could just go back onto the first point though, if that's okay. So I think what we're saying here is West Yorkshire requires a new local transport plan. This, as I say, this has been talked about for a little while, but it's around that timing. Our previous LTP was adopted in 2016 on a policy basis that was suitable to that time, but obviously a lot has happened since then, and a lot has happened since then, which is why you're recognising that timescale, because we've had lots of conversations, particularly since COVID, etc., etc. As obviously was discussed yesterday, we've kind of taken a big step forward around bus and around mass transit. So it's making sure that this LTP has the right policy basis on which to deliver those, and making sure those hooks are there, as well as champion integrated transport. So coming back to kind of your point around wanting to see a lot more detail into that, the timing for that is not now. The timing for that is coming forward in the next few months. yesterday at the Combined Authority, it was approved that we go out to engage in June, and that's engagement on that vision. So what we are wanting to do in June is really have a conversation in public about the vision for the local transport plan, its direction of travel, its network principles, and its kind of objectives. On the back of that engagement, we'll then be able to have a more detailed conversation around the policy environments that we want, the policies that we want to bring forward, and the implementation plan that sits behind that. So that's why we are where we are today with the content here. It's worth me just saying that the vision that we are currently building and working on, that we'll come out to engage with in June, is built upon the West Yorkshire plan. So, and it is about delivering the transport mission within that. So there's a clear linkage through of how that happens. And obviously all of the stuff we've been discussing today so far kind of comes through that process as well.
Thank you, Helen. I mean, we have, you know, obviously everything yesterday, there was so much that was added to that, wasn't there, with mass transit, with franchising, bus franchising, you know, and we have literally been sort of almost waiting. I can see what's happened now, just to make sure that members don't feel as if their words have just been, you know, not heard. I want to make sure that you know that we've got behaviour change and active travel still in there. We want to make sure that we're looking at the difference between the e-bikes and the e-scooters and the motorbike policy. I didn't know this, but did you know that motorbikes are the biggest form of transport in the world? I had no idea. 80 motorbikes are the biggest form of transport in the world. China, anywhere, you know, India. I had no idea about that. Somebody told me that recently. But anyway, you know, it's really important, I think, that the members that have brought this, because we did talk about this last year, didn't we? So we've got freight and waterway policy. We need to look at that, including rail, obviously. I'm aware that Canal and River Trust have been back to the government this week to lobby for more funds. I mean, I was really lucky because I was briefed by Councillor Groves 3 years ago before she left the role of Chair of Transport, and she suggested that we really needed to look at the existing freight strategy quite closely. And, you know, she explained that the viability for the commercialisation of the canal, you know, that was going to potentially bring 4,200 vehicles off the road on the M62. You know, that's massive. We need to look at that. What else? We looked at last year, we looked at the bus and rail footfall, home working positives, and the rise in sort of deliverers, you know, Deliveroo and what have you, you know, we looked at the way that the world had changed basically post-COVID, yeah? That obviously needs to be in the way that we're writing this new policy. And members also talked quite a lot about pollution, public health and clean air zones and how we're going to incorporate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, that's really helpful summary. Thank you to try and bring through the LTP. In terms of the kind of active travel and e-bikes, etc., are kind of some of the glue that comes together to bring some of these bigger things that we're talking about, mass transit, the quality of the bus network. It's that full integrated approach that we are really looking at. There is a lot of work going on in the background around our strategies and our policies and our thinking on all of those areas. So on freight, and we're currently doing a piece of work internally at the moment, which we will come through this process, updating our active travel strategy as well. So as two examples amongst a sea of others. Decarbonisation is also one of our key themes in here, and we through our network principles, if you like, we then have a number of cross-cutting themes. Decarbonisation is one, access to opportunity is another, and kind of equality, diversity and inclusion is another. So we're trying to run those three themes, if you like, through our kind of core, I'm going to say some words, through our core pillars that are in our vision at the moment. So we're trying to really build that as a full picture as we go through. It's also worth me saying that we are trying to take a very place-based approach to this LTP, so being sympathetic to the range of locations that we have across West Yorkshire. be that, you know, Leeds city centre versus Wakefield city, and kind of then those other local rural areas as well. So that place-based approach has kind of been a strong way in which we're building up our thinking. So once we have our vision discussed openly and engaged in the summer, on the back of that we can really then bring our strategy work and our policy work through that process to make sure that our thinking in that way is matched to what everybody's telling us through where we place our vision.
And obviously the use of flexibus. Got to add that, sorry, but it really for me it does seem as if that is part of the jigsaw puzzle. It's got to be for people who can't do the active travel. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the pieces of work we're doing within the team is looking at kind of the principles around connectivity by bus, and DRT is part of that process.
Very reassuring to hear. Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Great, thank you for the thanks for the update. I think, like Amanda said, I sort of went, oh, we're going to have local transport plan, and then I went, oh. But I understand because it's more about the process rather than the content. I mean, I noticed from that obviously the Climate Committee has agreed that we still don't know which of the 3 pathways we're heading for West Yorkshire's, you know, to deliver net zero by 2038. And so there's going to be a piece of work now done on which is a pathway and fill in all the gaps. So I'm just interested to know, how is that piece of work that's now going to be commissioned, looking at the one complete pathway, is going to fit in with the development of the local transport plan? Because as we know, decarbonisation transport is one of the biggest areas to deal with to make sure that we meet net zero. So I'm just wanting to know how those 2 bits of work are going to be integrated, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's okay. So the carbon emissions pathway work is part of our work in the LTP. So that work is running now, if you like. When we get through to the conclusions of that, the timing should hopefully, the conclusion of that will feed into where we are on our LTP. So we have one of our work streams in the LTP, as I was saying, around the cross-cutting decarbonisation theme, is being supplemented by the work in the carbon emissions pathway. So that dovetailing should hopefully, in a very process way, that dovetailing should hopefully happen.
That's great, and I just hope in the, I mean, I know that, you know, if you look for things, obviously on the West Yorkshire Combined Authority website, you can find things about the importance of net zero, but I really hope in the, when you're going out to consultation and you're talking about the themes and it being place-based, that actually, you know, that aim is really writ large. So everybody, you know, the earlier you bring everybody into the conversation saying this is such a huge thing that we've got to do. We can't not do this for ourselves, for the everything that we want to see to have a livable West Yorkshire going forward. This is what we need to do. I think you're more likely to, you know, people will go with you on that journey. So I just really hope, because I didn't actually, if you're looking at 2.7 here, integral to the co-development, you know, I know all of those other things are great, people first, outcome based. You talk about vision zero, but that's to do with road safety. And you haven't actually got there. And I was a bit surprised. I went, well, where's your decarb? Because that is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. And I didn't see it. So just to say, I hope in everything else and the way when you are going out in June and we're all going out to everybody in our communities to talk about it, that we're actually explaining what a massive challenge that is. But we, you know, hopefully we're going to be able to solve that together. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd really like it to come from a place of how can you help rather than this is what we're going to do to you. Because if we don't take people with us, we've lost the game, haven't we? Yeah. Do you want to come back on?
Thank you. Yeah, that's key to it. So there's 2 things in that. There are things we all know we want, which is a better, more integrated transport network, and there are things that we all know we kind of want to help deliver that. So that people focus, that customer centric focus is really what we're trying to do, and we've also developing a piece of theory, if you like, at the moment around that customer approach and that how does it feel for the person, and that does interact with certain bits of transport and doesn't, kind of how is their journey coming through.
In therapy we call it person-centred. Okay, Alison, would you like to contribute?
Thank you. I was just going to make a couple of other points. So the Pathways work is being led by my team, and so, I've come and spoken to you about that before, and that's absolutely our aim, to get to a single pathway. So Helen's covered the point that dovetails with the work that's happening around the local transport plan. But just to another point, that the Mayor's Big Climate Chat is currently running. It's due to conclude shortly. So we've also run a couple of so the chat itself and the survey online is still live. But we've also run some deep dive sessions. And transport's been one of the themes, and some of the colleagues from Helen's team has led those. And so all of the sort of evidence that we're gathering through that, which is, to your point, are kind of asking people what they think rather than us telling them what we're going to do. All of that sort of body of evidence will also feed into the work that Helen and her team are doing on the transport plan.
That's great. Thanks, Alison. Anybody else?
Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Pinnock.
Yes, thank you. Now then, this plan is coming at a very interesting time, and quite apart from the decarbonisation issue, which I don't belittle, but if you talk to a lot of people about public transport in West Yorkshire, you'll find them complaining almost inevitably about the non-existence of it, for all sorts of reasons, and it would be one of the marks of a very well organised society that you have an absolutely brilliant public transport system that was available to everybody within a short walking distance from where they live. I know that's not possible in all cases, but we have quite a way to go, I think, particularly in some parts of West Yorkshire where it's just lacking the frequent and convenient public transport system. Now we're doing something about that with franchising, and I would like us to make sure that the franchising thread is not lost within this local transport plan, because clearly the two are, or should be, going hand in hand, because you are saying that is how we want to do public transport. And I think that if we're going to ask people, they will just laugh in our faces if we can't say, well, we're going to make public transport more demand sensitive, if you like. It's got to be more flexible in order to deal with changes in demand and so on. I don't know how we do that, mind. That's a bit of a conundrum.
There's AI.
Oh,
let's not mention that.
No. I'm not sure you can use AI to drive a bus, but you might.
Or can you?
It's possible. But
you can. I'm being told by a scrutiny officer you can.
Oh, all right. Okay, you can. But it comes back to the point that people will say to you, what they want of public transport is something that is reliable and convenient, and if it happens to be decarbonised, then you know that is probably a good thing. But I suspect for the majority of people, they might put that decarbonisation might come slightly lower down the list to reliability. But I'm not saying you can't do both.
That's great. Thank you, Andrew. Simon.
Thank you. So I think it's really important to emphasise that the decisions that were taken yesterday are fundamental parts of a new local transport plan. And the local transport plan is not written in isolation of those at all. So as a result of yesterday's combined authority meeting, we are clear now in terms of how we want to go about organising the bus system going forwards. We are clear in terms of where we want to take a future tram system, and we are clear in terms of what our priorities are for the local rail network. So that core set of systems that define the base public transport network are now starting to come together with a greater degree of clarity around that. As Helen rightly says, what we then need to continue to drive forward on is how we use active modes as first and last mile options within a public transport system, and also as just a natural way that we get around our neighbourhoods. And again, we are a long way on the right path as West Yorkshire in that regard. It shouldn't be overlooked that Greater Manchester, West Midlands and West Yorkshire are the three places that are regarded by Active Travel England as exemplar locations in that regard. To pick up on Councillor Pinnock's particular point, so bus franchising gives us the opportunity to understand travel markets and actually be able to do something about it as West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Now that doesn't come without future funding challenges for us. We can provide a network not dissimilar to the network that is already out there, but better organised, better promoted once over with the funds that are available to us. And then we need to make the case to ourselves in terms of where can we go beyond that. But the important difference between where we have been and where we will be going now as an organisation is we will be pulling all of the levers. And one of the early pieces of work that will now start to happen inside the organisation is to take a much more customer-focused approach to the way in which we go about planning our transport system going forwards.
Thank you, Simon, and congratulations on all the work. I mean, I know you've all worked so hard on this. Yeah, but I was really quite alarmed. I was watching from home. I don't get out much, and I was quite surprised how much we spent in one meeting. So it must have been billions. In one meeting, we spent, obviously, the money, mass transit. Yes, we'll have that. We'll have franchising. Yes, we'll have that. It just went on and on and on. All the projects. I was like, we must have spent billions in one meeting. That was like, whoa, scrutiny. Are you ready? We've got a lot to look at. So yeah, anyway, it was fantastic that you managed to do that piece of work and get it through. It's brilliant. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question reference to the franchising and also the time, effort and money that we spend on the carbon debacle, because I find it interesting that we've demonised carbon over the last decade when it's always been around. Its carbon emissions in this country have been flatlining since the mid-1970s. It's never been an issue before the last 10 years, and why we spend so much effort and money on trying to decarbonise something that's naturally declining anyway is beyond me. If we take the carbon down to carbon neutral, which obviously carbon doesn't know any boundaries, so it's not just the UK that will be carbon neutral. That can't happen. But let's supposing we do, then obviously the first thing that happens is all vegetation dies, so we'd probably starve to death anyway. So I just don't understand the carbon cult thing that's been going on for the last decade. So I'd like to see and have somebody explain to me why we have to decarbonise transport when it's not a problem, never been a problem, and it's definitely not been a problem since the 1970s. So that's one thing. And the next thing is on the franchising. If we can't work with the existing model, which are the buses and trains that are out there, and manage them as far as offices from Wyker and the individual boroughs, and we can't get the contracts to work, and we can't demand that certain things are done for our residents, why do we think that franchising will be any different and the cost of that will be warranted? Thank you.
Thanks for your input. I'm sure we've all got different opinions, and every opinion is valid, and I appreciate that. I think we, well, an opinion on carbon. You know, I think everyone's got a different opinion, different understanding.
Chair, it's not an opinion. It's pure fact.
Okay.
Sorry, are you a climate scientist?
Yeah.
Well, it's the climate scientists that have created the problems.
I'm not. I don't want to get into does it exist? Does it not exist? It's definitely something that can be talked about outside.
It's a known
of
fact.
This. Well,
it is a known fact. There is no debate. Climate change is happening. Climate scientists have set that out. It's one of the biggest challenges facing us in the 21st century. It is known. And I really...
Okay. I don't want to get into a discussion, okay? Thank you, everybody. Simon Warburton, would you like to come in on the other issue?
So, I mean, to simply address the carbon point, we have carbon as a driver within the local transport plan because there are legislative requirements that are placed on the combined authority. I don't wish to get into a debate. It is simply a fact, and we have statutory duties in that regard. With regard to bus franchising, it's a very fair question. So historically, over the last 40 years, increasingly over the last 20-25 years in particular, we, along with other local transport authorities, have looked to improve the bus offer by working in the most binding partnership arrangements that we can put in place with private operators. So in effect, we have used public capital to invest in improved bus waiting facilities, in facilities such as the real-time information system that we have in West Yorkshire, in bus priority measures to help buses to move easier through congested points on the highway system. And in return, we have looked for the industry to step forward and improve its offer. And the conclusion that we have reached is that has not got us very far. The difference between working in partnership and working under franchises is very simply we will set out clearly in binding commercial contracts what is expected, and that will cover all aspects of the customer proposition: vehicle quality, driver training standards, customer handling standards, integrated ticketing arrangements, vehicle maintenance standards. I could go on. All of these issues will be contractual requirements that we will then put in a contractual monitoring regime in place, and that's exactly what you've seen rolling out on the streets in Greater Manchester. It will be a very, very similar approach that we will move to bring it in place here. So the difference between where we have been and where we are going is that we will then be able to demand those standards, and there will be penalty regimes if those standards aren't met.
Yeah, of course do.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So just one question on the contract then. Why aren't the contracts that we already have with the providers similar to what you're talking about as far as the franchise? They don't. What do you mean they don't exist? Sorry.
Commercial services are not provided under contract.
So there's no contract between councils, boroughs,
not in that
and the providers. Okay.
It's been one of the main issues all along. So they can't be held to account in the same way. No, it's okay.
I do apologise.
Yeah, but you're right. It needs to change. Absolutely right. It needs to change. And I think Simon and his team are working on that as part of that. And I mean, as I've suggested, obviously we're talking now about the bus reform, and in the next few months, I'd really like you to have a look at that. Please look at that document. It explains in so much detail. I know and for us, it's a lot. It's probably too much detail, but it does explain how it's going to cut up the different areas and how each of our areas, even if you just look at your own area and then come back in the next municipal year, and we'll look at that then. But I think it's so important that we understand how it's going to be carved up and negotiated. Yes, Simon.
Chair, so if I can also add that you quite rightly made the reference to the fact that there's about 1,200 pages of material which we have produced. Incredibly important that we do so, incredibly important that we follow due legal process, but I recognise that we are a small club, those of us who have read all 1,200 pages of the documentation. Now that the decision has been made, once we've gone through the local government election process, we will be putting in place a series of briefing exercises for local councillors to explain, so where does this process go from here. So yeah, we don't expect everybody to read all of that. We now want to set that out very simply once we've got through the election period.
I think we would all really appreciate that, Simon. Thank you. And thank you, Katie, for all the reading she's been doing as well. I know she's been working in the background, reading lots for us. It's 5 to 12 members. Has anyone got to leave bang on 12?
Sorry, I just want to make a brief comment.
Yeah, please, Tony. Just.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a brief comment about my customer experience this morning, because I went for the.
It is a therapy session for people who use public transport.
Oh, it is. It is. I use public transport when I come into Leeds from Castleford. I went to the train station. There was the notice up saying the train had been cancelled because of a landslide. That were good, because not only did it tell me that my train had been cancelled, it said because it told me why. I went to the bus station not far away. Went to the bus station. And unfortunately, the 410 to Leeds was cancelled, but it didn't say why. So I went back to the train station. Now I were okay with all that because I had the information. The train station now is a waiting room and a cafe. So, and it just meant I was going to be half an hour late. So I just want to say things have improved over the past time. But I'm aware that it's the time and the place where it was good. Because if I'd been in say on a Sunday or something, on an evening where I'd had a longer wait, I might not feel so good. But I did feel good that I was informed why, and that I were only half an hour late. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you are taking on board what the customers say.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, Councillor, so it's good that the information was there. The fact that the 410 wasn't running isn't good. So we're not there yet.
Chair, can I just make a quickie?
Yeah, please.
This is on active travel. This is a Yorkshireman's.
Oh, you've opened another can of worms.
No, it's a Yorkshireman's view based on this past year. Anywhere's a long way in the rain.
On that jolly note, I think we should end this subject.
Yes.
Thank you both for your work on this, and we look forward to seeing it next year.
Indeed.
I've got to look very briefly at our work programme. So the things that I've got on are, we've got the bus reform consultation report, we've got Flexibus, we've got mass transit, LTP4, housing strategy, because we are still housing and infrastructure, I think. As of today.
Well,
okay, so yeah, just to round up then, it's a real big thank you to our officers and guests who've joined us today. Thank you to our scrutiny officers, Khaled and Katie. And of course, no one really knows whether they're going to be here next time. Therefore, I'd like to just take this opportunity to say thank you, members. I've really enjoyed working with you. Hopefully I'll be here. What role, I'm not sure yet. The Combined Authority AGM, we will find out who's going to be doing what when, and that is going to happen on the 20th of June. So good luck to all of our members who are up for election, and we hope to see you on the other side. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe journey back.
And we should all thank Amanda, because you've been our chair the last few years, so thank you so